If you missed the recent radio interview on Power 105's The Breakfast Club with Mayor Adams and political commentator and defense attorney Olurin, you may have been one of the few. Olurin's Instagram posts of the interview have been played millions of times as she pressed Adams on his administration's policies. It was a nearly hour-long conversation. Here is just one of the many combative exchanges.
Since the day one of your administration, one of the first things you did was add 1,000 officers to the subway because you claimed that the subways are unrideable. You and Hochul did this and said how dangerous it is, and you recently did that when you deployed the National Guard.
Sister, but that wasn't my question, Queen. My question was, what was my fear mongering? What did I say?
You continuously say, I could point to a number of videos and quotes and everything from you, but you've said repeatedly that the subways are dangerous, that New York is dangerous. You complain about crime relentlessly. So what I'm saying to you is, if you are saying that New York is the safest city, it's one of the safest big cities in this country, which is true, and you're recognizing that the subway stations are in fact not half as dangerous as they're presented to be, I'm saying, how do you reconcile how your rhetoric has played into people's fear?
Okay.
And Olurin joins me now to talk a little bit about this. Thanks for coming on the Rush Hour.
Thank you for having me.
I mean, were you surprised, before we get into the substance of what you were addressing there with the mayor, were you surprised that you had nearly an hour to sit down and really have at it with the mayor in this conversation?
Yes, absolutely. I was surprised even when I got the request. I didn't think it was going to happen at all.
And so it did happen. And let's talk about a little bit of the substance. First, the broader view. You were essentially saying that the mayor is wants it both ways. To say that this is the safest big city in America, but also to say there is a big problem with crime in the city. What was the substance of your argument, really, with the mayor?
Well, I think most New Yorkers know that Mayor Adams has been one of the foremost authorities on saying that crime is out of control in the cities, in particular the subways. So it was interesting to me to hear him suddenly say, oh no, New York is actually the safest big city, that crime is not an issue, that our subways are the safest systems. So that seemed to contradict you saying that we need to hire thousands more officers for the subways because of the danger, and you saying that there's this perception of crime that you need to invest in. So I wanted him to reconcile how he makes sense of this being the safest place, but also a place that needs expanding police force.
And so today we had the opportunity, because the mayor held his weekly Q&A with reporters, to once again ask him to reconcile just that. And we asked him particularly about your interview. Here's what the mayor said on that topic today.
On the Breakfast Club, I was amazed I was able to get a word in. You know, being honest to New Yorkers is not fear-mongering. New York is the safest big city in America. This is not my opinion. The stats show that. When I tell New Yorkers, honestly, about recidivism, random acts of violence, people with severe mental health illnesses committing acts of violence, that's not fear-mongering.
So the conversation continues, and he says that is not fear-mongering. That is a real concern of many New Yorkers. What's your reaction to that?
Well, in the interview, Mayor Adams said that the reason New Yorkers don't feel safe, that there's a difference between the perception of safety versus how we feel. And he said that they don't feel safe precisely because the media is sensationalizing random acts of violence. So by his own admission, he is here telling us about random acts of violence and continuously talking about crime in the subway. Again, my issue has never been protesting that the mayor says the city is safe. It's that the mayor is the one feeding us the rhetoric to not feel safe.
Okay, but let's talk about the issue of the extra police officers in the subway. He says that when he goes around to various town halls, community meetings, that people do tell him that the presence of police officers in the system makes them feel safer. And he goes back and forth on this perception versus reality of the crime in the subways and in the city in general.
I think it's interesting that whenever the mayor tells us that people, particularly Black and brown New Yorkers, feel safer with over-policing, which I think we all common sense-wise know that's not the case, he always brings up anecdotal evidence. But when we present him the federal monitor's reports, the statistics, the studies, surveys, or even word from real New Yorkers like me who live in those Black neighborhoods, who live in Flatbush and Brooklyn, and we tell him that over-policing is not what we are wanting. We don't want that invested in, we want our communities invested in. He tells us that's not true, but he never can point to us to anything other than anecdotal evidence.
In terms of, you were talking the federal monitor's report, you also discussed Rikers with the mayor and cutting funding to some of the programs in Rikers. He said, you know what, those programs were a waste of money. They were taking money, but they weren't delivering on the promises. And everybody knows there is a lot of government waste. What was your reaction to the way his administration is handling Rikers and the way he responded to you on the Rikers conversation?
I would say that Rikers receives $860 million a year. The $17 million of that is put towards the reentry services, the programs for people at Rikers, is a very tiny fraction of the budget. So I would question why you are interested, and it's okay by the mayor's own admission, to continue investing in more police that he says are only there to make us feel safer. So while he's cutting budgets across the city, he is, by his own admission, investing in policing that he says we only need for perception, and yet you will cut 0.001% of the budget that's used for the programs to help the people at Rikers, which I want us to mention that Rikers is a pretrial detention center. 85% of everybody at Rikers has not been convicted of a crime. They're only awaiting trial. So you will cut this tiny amount of money that's there for those people to have services so that they could better reenter society and make it safer for all of us. Meanwhile, you have no problem continuing to find all of the money possible for initiatives that you say are only there for perception.
One point the mayor was trying to make was he felt that you believe, and people with your progressive views believe, that there should not be a criminal justice system. So I want to ask you to stay with us. In our next hour, I want to get into a little bit of the details of the conversation that you had with the mayor on criminal justice in general and recidivism in particular. Olurin, criminal justice attorney, activist, and movement lawyer. We thank you so much for being with us on the Rush Hour. We will be back after this. Welcome back. In our last hour, I spoke with movement lawyer and political commentator Olurin. Her recent nearly hour-long debate on Power 105's The Breakfast Club went viral. She was debating the mayor. It has been seen by millions. She confronted and disagreed with Mayor Adams on a number of issues, from crime to policing to Rikers Island, migrants, and more. And Olurin is here with me to talk really about the substance of that interview and some of the specific points of disagreement with the mayor. Here's part of what the mayor told you. Before we get to it, I just want to play part of what the mayor told you during that heated conversation.
I say this term all the time: idealism collides with realism. Mm-hmm. This far leftist mindset that believes we should not have a criminal justice system in place, mm-hmm. We're going to look like some of these other cities that you're seeing with a lack of a criminal justice system in place.
You're an attorney. Do you believe we should have a criminal justice system?
I believe that we should, and I believe that we do, but I think what I believe as a philosophical matter wasn't important to the conversation. If you notice in that interview, I never once brought up my ideological opinions. I never once commented or soapboxed about how I thought about his policies. What I did was present the policies and the statistics and give him the opportunity to comment on them, and he just did not want them to be heard by an audience that he usually hides this information from.
Did you feel that he was undermining you by changing the topic that way, as opposed to addressing the substance of the issues that you were bringing up?
Yes, but I didn't have a problem with that. I actually appreciate that New Yorkers, particularly Black New Yorkers who watch The Breakfast Club, were able to see that, because a lot of the issue with Mayor Adams' administration is not that people like me have a hard time opposing it or explaining what's wrong. It's that regular New Yorkers don't hear about it. They're not aware of the fact that 31 people died in Rikers since Mayor Adams became mayor, because his administration ended the policy of informing the public about in-custody deaths.
In watching the interview and in seeing how viral it has gone, it really struck me that there is this underlying tension between those who feel the city is over-policed and those who feel there is a real risk that New York will become a city with a breakdown of law and order. And that really seemed to be part of the push-pull between you and the mayor. What do you say to that?
I think that would be a reduction of the issue. In actuality, it's not that people like me or Black and brown New Yorkers are saying that we don't care about crime and safety. It's that we're saying continuing to invest in over-policing is not actually doing anything to address it. And more importantly, when we present New York City as this place that is rampant with liberal ideology or leftist policies or this progressive utopia, that's not the case. I'm not in politics. I'm not the mayor. Mayor Adams, who is former NYPD, is the police. We have the largest police department in the country, over 36,000 officers. So where is this threat of people like me making the city lawless when none of my policies or my wishes or my philosophical ideologies are what we have as policy?
One topic that came up, and I want to talk a little bit about, is retail businesses and thefts in retail businesses. There's some data that I was looking back on shoplifting in New York City versus nationwide. And in New York City, and this is 2019, mid-2019 through mid-2023, New York City saw a 64% jump in retail thefts. Other smaller cities, St. Paul, St. Petersburg, for example, have seen retail thefts go way down during that time period. I want to play for you what the mayor said about, and this is not only retail theft recidivism, but in other criminal acts as well, and get your reaction. This is part of what the mayor said during that debate on Power 105.
We have a recidivist problem.
This is not true.
It's a revolving door. 38 people that assaulted transit workers were arrested 1,100 times. 545 people that were arrested for shoplifting were arrested 7,500 times. The person who shot that police officer, his driver, was just arrested for having a gun in April of last year. Now he's back doing the same thing all over again. These guys are arrested 10, 15 times. It's a small population of people that are repeated offenders.
What is your reaction to that?
It's not true. It's a lot of fear mongering. And again, when the mayor quotes these statistics or these stories, they are never linked to anything. I think it's interesting that in this interview, when I present the actual facts on the numbers from the Brennan Center, from the Federal Monitor, from the comptroller, he dismisses all of that, all of the statistics, but then he offers these competing narratives about recidivists and crime being out of control and all these things that completely contradict what is the actual law, what are the stats, and what we know about bail. And notice in that interview, I present them to the mayor that less than 2% of anybody that is released on bail in New York City is rearrested for violent crime. The reality is, and again, even if we wanted to have a larger conversation about recidivism, that would not be at the fault of people like me. Again, it's not my policy once that are in place.
Is it your view that shoplifting is a problem in New York?
It's my view that crime is a problem everywhere, but I wouldn't say that shoplifting should be the primary concern in a city that's one of the most expensive cities to live in the world, where people are struggling to make ends meet.
If you were in the mayor's shoes, I know you said you're not a politician, but if you could change 2 or 3 things about the way criminal justice is run in this city, what would those things be?
If I could change 3 things about the way criminal justice is run in New York City, I would expect us to address criminal justice. So instead of when we're faced with crime or the reality that crime is a continued problem, I would hope that we accept that crime is not overnight, that crime, the problems that we have now, we didn't get to overnight, and the solutions will not be overnight. So in the same way we think it's efficient to continuing to invest in policing every year, year after year, even though we insist on saying that we're not safe, why don't, instead of we do that, we put some of that money into housing? The homelessness that we're complaining about, why don't we put some money there? The mental health issues that we're complaining about, the subways, why don't we put some money there? The education and the lack thereof, why don't we put some money there? So that's what I would say. I would say the same way we think it is a suitable means to invest in policing, we should invest in people.
Movement lawyer Olurin, thank you so much. Appreciate your coming on.
Thank you.